Alrighty, let's see. Curious, okay, that's a good one. No fear, young and optimistic. Alrighty, a few more seconds. I like those. Curious, no fear, young and optimistic. Alrighty. Those were very good ones. Free, okay, yes. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you for those who participated. So in order, to move on with this webinar, we have to keep in mind that for teens, their relationships are real and they matter. And this is important, especially when working with teen clients, that we validate their feelings that they have when it comes to relationships, because to them, that's a real relationship, even though, we might be older and we've been through that stage already, and we might think we know what the outcome's going to be of that relationship. In that moment, for the teen, their relationship is real and they matter. And then another thing to keep in mind is that teens are looking for autonomy. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, sorry. But basically, it means that they're making decisions on their own. They want to be free. They're being more independent. They want to be more independent. So that's also what goes on with teens and relationships. Then they may be seeking connection and attachment, which of course, this is also very true. They want to belong somewhere. They want to feel loved. They want to know that there's someone out there who loves them and build that connection with them. Relationships provide a way to explore their sexuality and identity. Of course, this is true as well. A lot of teens, are figuring out what they like, what they don't like, learning their boundaries and things like that. So relationships are a way to explore all of this. And then early relationships can set the stage for their adult relationships. Yes, and that's why it's important to raise awareness around teen dating violence and the different red flags, but also the way to make healthy relationships. It's important because an early relationship can really, like it says here, set the stage for their relationships when they're adults. And that's what we're trying to raise awareness and prevent for there to be more violence in relationships, but rather educate and share healthy tips and things like that for our teens to have healthy relationships. And then we have Sydney.
So what is teen dating violence? Like when we, throw out this term. And so really kind of thinking about it as domestic violence that is impacting teens. So this is physical, psychological, or sexual abuse, harassment, or stalking, and that includes online and in-person stalking of any person age 13 or age 12 to 18. And this is in the context of past and present romantic relationships. So really thinking about it as domestic violence / intimate partner violence that impacts teenagers. Okay. And so some relationship facts. So it's important to know how often this is happening to teens and kind of what their experiences are. And so 1 in 3 adolescents in the United States is a victim of physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal abuse from a dating partner. Now, this far exceeds any other type of violence that youth experience. So teen dating violence is a really prevalent issue. And we don't always think about that when we are talking about domestic violence or when we're talking about teenage relationships. 1 in 10 high school students has been purposely hit, slapped, or physically hurt by a boyfriend or girlfriend. And so that's telling us that these relationship patterns are being set up pretty early on, where people are learning to be physically abusive and they are getting primed to expect physical abuse from their romantic dating partners. And girls and young women between the ages of 16 to 24 experience the highest rate of intimate partner violence, which is almost triple the national average. And that's for a lot of reasons, primarily the vulnerability aspect of, being maybe uninformed, not knowing how to get resources or support, maybe just feeling like, I want to be loved. And this person is showing me love and not understanding that this is coming at, a great cost to their safety, their mental health, their well being. Violent relationships in adolescence can have serious ramifications by putting the victims at higher risk for substance abuse, eating disorders, risky behaviors, and further domestic violence. So, one of the ways that teens cope with what's happening are all of these things that are coming up. So sometimes people will be focused on the eating disorder. They'll be focused on the substance abuse. They'll be focused on the risky sexual behavior and never get to the underlying issue that's causing those things, which is oftentimes some form of domestic violence or trauma. And then the severity of intimate partner violence is often greater in cases where the pattern of abuse was established in adolescence. So what that means is that, let's say you have a couple who was in a relationship as teens where that relationship was abusive. We see that as they become adults, the pattern, frequency, the intensity of the violence becomes that much bigger, greater, if the abusive patterns were established in adolescence. So, and that is on both ends for the person who's causing harm, the person using abuse, and the victim and the survivor. So we know that the person who's using abuse will be that much more likely to use really extreme abuse as they get older. And similarly, the teen survivor will be that much more likely to not know how to get help or get out of an abusive situation when it becomes more violent as they get older. And so what makes teens vulnerable to dating violence? I think when we did the poll, one of the things that stood out was that, most of you all are in social services, some folks in education, mental health, counseling, things like that. But so that we come across these teens pretty regularly. And so what kind of makes them vulnerable? A big one is a lack of knowledge of healthy relationships. As Dahlia said, sometimes these are their first relationships, their first experiences. And so they don't always know what a healthy relationship looks like. So for them, this lack of experience makes them uniquely vulnerable. Also, the long-term planning part of their brain is still developing. And so this isn't to, shame or be like, oh, teenagers don't know what they're doing or anything like that, but just kind of on a biological level, that part of the brain doesn't get fully developed until into your 20s. And so not always thinking about how is this going to impact me long-term. Most teens aren't thinking like, oh, if I'm being physically abused now, I might be physically abused later in life, but more so just thinking, well, I hope that my boyfriend or girlfriend stops this abuse soon. So the long-term planning isn't really fully developed. They also maybe don't know how to express their boundaries. This is a big one because a lot of adults don't really respect teenage boundaries. A lot of adults, kind of it's my way or the highway, or, you may have adults being like, I have a right to go through your social media, see your phone, do all of these things, and not explain to teens how that is they're trying to keep the teens safe, but more so just like not respecting their boundaries at all. And so then teens often don't feel like they have boundaries that they can express. If no one's ever told you that, oh, you have a boundary and, people aren't allowed to cross it, then they might not know that they can express that boundary. They might not even know that they have it. And we have to kind of be mindful when we're working with teens as, either parents or as, service providers, that sometimes some of the things that we do are because we want to be able to still have some kind of authority, like this is a child and we're adults, and so we're trying to have authority, but not understanding that them having boundaries sets them up for success later on in life with these relationships. And so oftentimes they just have never learned how to express a boundary, or an adult has never told them that they even have them. They may be unfamiliar with what abuse / power and control dynamics look like. So we know that, we do a lot of work with teens here at Monarch, and we'll often hear things like, teens saying that if their partner is jealous, it means they love them. Or if their partner is, checking on their social media, or, kind of calling them constantly when they can't get a hold of them, that is a sign that this person loves them. And we know that that's also a sign that there might be some abuse that's happening. And so teens might not really understand the power and control dynamics that are at play in some of these relationships. And similarly, those using abuse might not understand why and what feelings are coming up for them as to why they are doing some of these things. So it's really important that we do a lot of education around what power and control looks like, around why these things should be taken seriously. A big one is their relationships aren't taken seriously, so their problems aren't taken seriously. I think there was one person in the chat who kind of, noted like fleeting is one of the words that comes to mind in teen relationships. And that's definitely, I think, something we kind of often think about, like, oh, how long are these folks going to be together? They're 14. Like, we can kind of go to that realm, which as adults, who may be married, who may be, in these long-term relationships, we might have that distance and objectivity. But for the teens, because their relationships aren't taken seriously, oftentimes their relationship issues aren't taken seriously. So if a teen is, kind of dealing with abuse, but maybe folks don't really even kind of consider the relationship that important, they might not understand that the same feelings that stop a adult survivor of abuse from leaving the situation will also impact a teen survivor, maybe even to a greater degree, because they don't have, like I said, a lot of the things adults have around boundaries, long-term planning, and things like that. And this last one, they feel they have no one to go to for help. Oftentimes, we still have a society that really blames domestic violence survivors for their situations. One of the big things that comes up always, the first question is, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave sooner? Why don't you leave right now? Kind of blaming the person who's being abused for the abuse. And so teens may feel like they have nowhere to go for help. Maybe, for some teens, they might have, parents who are more conservative or strict or things like that, where their parents don't even know they're in a relationship, let alone that relationship is abusive. So how do I go and tell my parent that I am being abused if they would probably focus more on the fact that I was in a relationship than the fact that the relationship turned violent. And then similarly, maybe there's situations in schools where they don't trust their counselors, or they don't trust, their school administrators because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want their parents to find out. And so they feel like they have limited options of where to go to actually receive help. And so this is a really important kind of piece of things around, the cycle of violence, of intergenerational cycle of violence. And it really mirrors the cycle of violence just in general for domestic violence. And you can really kind of start anywhere here, but I'm going to start at the top. So there will be parental violence. So the teen is in a household or the child is in a household where, mom and dad are in an abusive relationship with one another. And there's, maybe emotional violence, there's physical violence, and those kinds of things are happening within the household. And then you have a child witness. So the children witness it. They see mom and dad fighting, or, a lot of people like to believe that their kids don't know what's happening. Maybe, like we fought in the other room and they had headphones in and all of those things. But we know that children know what's going on in their homes. And so the child witnesses it. This creates the behavioral and psychological effects of, maybe feeling worthless, expecting violence. This might be where some of those things we talked about, like eating disorders or substance use, kind of come into play. And you have those behavioral and psychological effects. Maybe they learn that, okay, it's okay to be violent because I'm seeing that in my household. And then teen dating violence occurs. And this is on both spectrums. Maybe the person saw that abuse was occurring in the house and they learned that violence gets you what you want. So now I'm going to abuse the people around me. Or vice versa, maybe they learn that violence is normal and that they will be more accepting of violence being perpetrated against them. And then this person and eventually becomes a parent, and then the cycle starts all over again. And so this creates intergenerational cycles where we hear this all the time, where the teen is being abused and their parent was also being abused at the similar age, and their grandparent was in a domestic violence relationship. And we see these cycles occur across generations. And so really, when we talk about breaking the cycle of abuse, we're not just talking about breaking the cycle within one individual, but really looking across generations at how this impacts the people in these families. And before we go on, well, we're already on, but I do want to just pause for, I don't know, I can't really see the chat. If there's any questions or anything like that in the chat, if there are, please, or if anybody has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat as we go. But so now some of the impacts of teen dating violence. So we talked a little bit about this, but I think it's really important to explore. So depression is a big one, and we sometimes minimize teens' mental health issues. So will minimize if a teen is feeling depressed, if they're struggling to get out of bed each day, if they're really kind of struggling with just kind of what we might call activities of like daily living, like, doing homework, doing all those things, because they are in that low mood. And so if you are working with a teen who is depressed, really like acknowledging and validating that. And if you're working with parents of a depressed teen, making sure the parents don't minimize it, because we see this a lot with parents kind of just being like, well, just snap out of it. And we know that as adults, if you've ever dealt with depression, just snap out of it doesn't really work, or then there'd be nobody who's depressed. Another one, anxiety. They might feel really anxious. This might be related to PTSD. Like they might be super hyper vigilant, on guard, like watchful, kind of jumpy. They might be hyper alert about kind of what's going on around them. Or they might be hyper focused on their partner. So like this anxiousness of like, how can I make sure that I'm keeping my partner happy, and keeping my partner safe? Another big one, aggression or acting out. Usually when a teen or child acts out, people kind of just label them a bad kid, which is really difficult when we know that a lot of aggression and a lot of acting out, the majority of it is related to trauma. And that trauma might be because of the domestic violence that they're experiencing in their home, or it might be related to teen dating violence. Eating disorders is another one. We see people trying to really control, like eating disorders really come down to a control piece of things. And with any kind of domestic violence, including teen dating violence, the control has been taken away from that person. Their sense of safety has been taken away from them. And so they might try to get that back through an eating disorder or something of that nature. And then substance use, also a big one, trying to numb out some of their feelings, trying to, kind of feel differently. Again, not knowing how to cope with what's going on for them. Substance use might be a way for them to feel like they can disassociate or like numb out from the pain. And then suicidal ideation. And so it's really important, if you're ever working with teens who are expressing suicidal ideation, to kind of explore what their relationships look like. Is this related to unhealthy relationships? Is this related to teen dating violence? And so influences to teen relationships. So this is really important because so many different things influence teen relationships. A big one, family. So family sets up like kind of the first template for what teens see in a relationship. And so if their family of origin maybe has some unhealthy or abusive tendencies, then teens may emulate that because that is the first thing they've ever seen. If they have an abusive parent, then they might be that much more likely to be accepting of an abusive partner. Peers. So teens are kind of at that age where their friend group is like the end all beat all. And if their friends are also in these toxic relationships, or if their friends are normalizing, oh, that person's just jealousy is a good thing, or things like that, then they might be more likely to kind of see those things themselves. Media is a big one. We can talk all day about the toxic ways in which media portrays relationships, and relationships that are, kind of romanticized when really they are abusive or they're toxic or they're constant boundary crossings. And media may make those things look like romantic or desirable when at the end of the day they're actually setting teens up for abuse. One thing we hear all the time with teens is they'll see like a picture of a relationship and say like goals, but like not always know what's underlying that picture or what's underlying that like media representation of that relationship. It's also important to note that they are at an age where they are starting to have their own personal views and values. They're starting to differentiate from their family. And so they might have views around these kind of relationships or around their relationships that differ from their parents. And so that's important to know that they are also kind of coming up with their own worldviews at this point. A big one, the messages they've received about relationships and communication. So have they heard toxic things like boys will be boys, or if a boy hits you, it means he likes you, or, those kinds of really old tropes that we used to hear. That I remember even growing up, I would hear that like, oh, if a boy hits you or if a boy picks on you, it means he likes you. And so have those been internalized by that teen? And this is not to minimize teens in any way, but that their hormones, like that, they are at a stage where hormones are kicking in, where different changes are happening to their body, urges are happening to their bodies, and they're kind of trying to navigate that, and that can influence their relationships as well.
Thank you, Sydney. And as Sydney mentioned, in regards to ways in which we can and what we can see with teens, is I want to talk a little bit about teen dating violence and red flags. So it can be difficult, right, to recognize if a teen is going through an unhealthy relationship. Specifically, as Sydney mentioned, they're growing, they're becoming teens. Some of it is normalized, and so specifically when we don't see or there is no dramatic signs like black eyes or broken bones, right? So in the following, I'm going to talk about some of the common red flags that are seen. And one is certainly excessive jealousy and insecurity. Unfortunately to say, technology is changing the teens' romance now, and it's not in a healthy way. Insecurity and jealousy may lead to a teen demanding a partner to check in all the time. Hundreds of text messages, checking in where they're at all the time, and then of course, if they don't respond right away, questioning them in regards to the reason or the purpose of why they are not responding them back. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, smartphones and technology makes it easy for teens' relationship to become more unhealthy. And then also, not only because of text, but social media, and having access to their different platforms as well. In addition, then there is the invasion of privacy, which leads to the invasion of privacy and poor boundaries, right? Unhealthy or poor boundaries includes not allowing or going out with friends without their partner, right? Choosing to be with a partner more often, not going out with friends, maybe not participating in activities or hobbies they normally participated or like. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, having to share their passwords to their phone, their email, social media, and then, of course, as we mentioned, to not respecting each other's individual likes and needs. So these are just two of, but there are plenty of red flags that I want to talk about today. And unexpected anger and moodiness is also another, and that is when we see a teenager just becoming frustrated fairly easily and over the smallest things, right? But it's more when it's unnormal, because that is something that teenagers will go through. And then there's the controlling behavior, very similar to what I mentioned earlier. Controlling behavior can include, similar to the invasion of privacy, not allowing or not going out with friends without the partner. Once again, participating in hobbies not participating in hobbies that they like, having to share passwords. And then, of course, sometimes teens who are jealous make demands such as partner no longer use social media, they no longer wear certain clothing because they might get the attention, right? So, and then we go into the isolation not only from family, but isolating from friends or former friends, not feeling like going to social events. And then, of course, social contact with anyone but their dating partner. So it is important that if we notice these type of things that, we do try to provide support to the youth or the teen. Many times sometimes when we find that teens stop spending time with their friends and they only spend time with a partner, it might be not only be a sign that they're trying to isolate them from others, but also it is important to question ourselves and try to support them through that. Threatening physical harm. Threatening to hurt others or hurt themselves is a huge one. And it is important to not disregard. And then, of course, destroying personal property. Destroying personal property is one of the areas that we might see not only at home, but also in public places. Now, we talked about red flags, we talked about the cycle, and we want to kind of have a discussion in regards to helping teens foster healthy relationships, right? Because that is an important piece of how to make sure that we are supporting the teens. So first off, first relationships and communication experiences are with family. As Sydney mentioned, unfortunately to say, teens exhibit many times what they witness. So knowing how to establish and maintaining positive relationships can make a difference as they're making decisions, right? As they are not only making decisions on their personal growth, but also in romantic relationships, friendships, in school, at work. So overall, again, establishing those positive relationships can make a difference. Then teen benefits from healthy relationships with family as well. And therefore, as we mentioned earlier, what they witness at home with family, it is essential, right? We are the role models as adults, and so it is important to have that in mind. Teens learn what is healthy and unhealthy based on what they observe. We talked about the cycle again, and when teens are empowered through family, friends, school administrators, they have their role models, coaches, mentors, and youth groups to lead healthy lives and establish a healthy relationship. It is important to be able to do that. It is also important to create spaces for teens where they can learn these type of healthy behaviors, because again, if they're witnessing the opposite of violence in their homes, if they're witnessing that it is okay for them to treat their partner negatively, unfortunately, they feel that it's acceptable and they will normalize it. The other way is, of course, be genuine and honest with them. So being genuine and honest to teens is essential. So how can we foster that is, one, listening to them, providing them with that space, right? Ensuring and empowering them without hesitation. So it is important to understand a youth because they are growing and they are evolving, asking them to reflect on what they heard or how they can express themselves. Expressing is certainly very important. What can we do, or what can you do to be able to support youth through this process? So as adults, as peers, as coaches, role models, teachers, we can all play a very important role in helping teens recognize not only unhealthy, but also healthy relationships. And so these are a couple tips to consider in going through the positive change in their lives. And that is, of course, modeling appropriate boundaries. Modeling appropriate boundaries is essential. And this can include being clear if there is a concern, telling them about the abuse and how it is, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, pointing out the unhealthy, and also that you're taking it very serious because it is important. Teen dating violence is happening and is reality. Unfortunately, we don't talk much about teen dating violence because we feel that it's not happening, but it is existing, and it is important that we are taking a step to the right direction of ensuring that we're educating our youth and our community. And also other things that it's important is what Sydney mentioned earlier, right? Respecting their boundaries. Respecting not only their boundaries, but also their decision. We're trying to empower a teen to look at what they need to do and giving them the tools, giving them the options, but they will ultimately make the decision in regards to what is best for them. They will need to be ready to make that change. And that's also very important, allowing them to make those choices. And again, it is not easy for teens to share information with us as adults, right? So respecting that boundary as well is going to be a very essential part. And then, of course, discussing relationships as a spectrum from healthy to unhealthy to healthy. So how does the unhealthy look like? And how can a teen get from unhealthy to healthy, right? So talking about what constitutes as a healthy relationship. Healthy communication, mutual respect, trust, and kindness are just a few of the things that should be at the center of healthy relationships. And so having those conversations, encouraging to have a discussion about unhealthy relationships and how that might look like. Asking a teen about what do they think about abuse, and encouraging them to critically think about the impact of violence as well, and in their own relationship or in society as a whole. And then, of course, help them to trust their instincts. Teens are growing. They're going to be making decisions, and eventually they are going to be independent, right? So it is important that we allow them to, and that we help them navigate to make those decisions and those choices in a very well-informed way. In addition, we need to let them know they can come to us for support. Building rapport with teen can be difficult, right? But what's important about teens is being there for them, believing them, listening to what they have to tell you and see and hear, letting them know that you care, that you are there for them, and that you're paying attention, but most importantly, that you are not judging them for what they're going through or what they're sharing with you. Not only being supportive and understanding, it's essential with teens, but really stressing that you are there and that you are on their side. Honoring their growth and change. We talked about it throughout the webinar, honoring teens' growth and change as they're evolving, as they're growing, honoring not only their growth, but also their independence, their decision-making. And then, of course, also normalizing what they are going through. Not only are they growing, but they're becoming adults. And some of the decisions and some of the experiences that they are going to go through are not going to be easy. So therefore, normalizing their feelings and what they are going through is important as well. Now, how does Monarch Services provide supports to teens? Monarch Services has very comprehensive services, and our focus is to make sure that we're preventing violence from happening in the first place, right? And this is one of the purposes or reasons why we're having and holding these webinars, to have that conversation and to really say, you know, it's happening in our schools, it's happening in our communities, it might be happening to my child. So we want to make sure that we're recognizing that. And so Monarch Services has a child and youth program where our focus is to ensure that not only are we providing child counseling for survivors of trauma, not only teen dating violence, but sexual violence and human trafficking, but also we have professional therapy for youth. In addition, we have advocates who work closely with our youth, with children and youth, to make sure that our children are being heard and that they are receiving the most effective trauma-informed services as possible. In addition, our children and youth as well, we have what we call a call-out program, where if any social service, school administration contacts us, or even a youth contacts us and they want to talk about the situation, or they would like for us to meet with a youth individually on site, we are more than happy to do so. While it's a little bit more difficult during the pandemic, we find ways to make sure that we're providing that support effectively via phone. Our program also goes to the different schools or does a webinar, virtual support groups to youth, to ensure that we're having discussion about the different topics, not only around healthy relationships, but also consent, bullying, in addition, of course, sexual violence, and so on. And so those are our educational workshops, but also we do have support groups where our children and youth advocates go to the different schools or hold virtual support groups where youth are able to express their feelings. We're able to talk about what is healthy, what is unhealthy, what type of steps or what can we do to make sure that we're moving towards the right direction. And then we also have our prevention services, our prevention program that is here today. We not only go to different schools or do virtual presentations to health classes, but we can do outreach and information and presentations, because we want to make sure that, again, we are providing the message to our community. And so we're available to educate and, once again, prevent violence from happening in the first place. And really our goal here at Monarch, and our goal for today, is to work with our community, to work with all of you, to recognize these signs and to recognize the fact that it's happening. And so more right now, as we talked about the fact that technology can be useful, but also can be one of our one of the tools that can affect our teens even more right now while they're in not in school, per se. We also have our 24-hour crisis line, and our 24-hour crisis line is available for any age, any gender, anyone who would like any information, not only on our services, but also just to be able to debrief and talk about what they're going through. All of our services with Monarch are not only confidential, but they're also free of charge, and we do have advocates who are bilingual. So youth are able to call our crisis line at any time if they want to anonymously call us and talk about their situation. In addition, we're also available for community partners if they have questions on how to best work with the youth. Our agency also provides triple P parenting classes for parents, because as we talked about earlier, youth exhibit what they see, right? We are the role models. So it is important that also as parents, because we're the first individuals that they're receiving that the education per se, we want to make sure that we're also supporting the parent navigate these difficult times, but how to support their youth. And in addition, as well, we do have a confidential shelter. While it is for all survivors of trauma, we do have a room reserved for transitional youth as well. So if there is a situation where a youth does require a safe place and they're transitioning, we're more than happy to provide them with that support. But also, as we talked about teen dating violence, it really is an exhibit of that trauma that they have experienced. So therefore, if they're witnessing or if it's happening in their home, we just want the community to know that there's all these services that are available and that you are not alone in handling these sort of situations, but rather we have advocates who can provide support not only to the youth or the family member, but also to you as a community as well. And now with that, we're going to open it up for questions for all of you. I know that it was quite a bit of information, but we want to have a conversation about what is happening here in our community as we talked about teen dating violence and the fact that this is a teen dating violence awareness month as well. So we would like to open it to you. Are there any questions for us in regards to services or how to best support youth, or what should we do as in a community? You're more than welcome to unmute yourself and you can put it in the chat.
Hi, this is Jules here, one of the counselors for PVUSD. And I just first want to say thank you guys so much for everything you do for our students. I really love having this resource that I can call on and refer students to. And I just want to confirm the best way to refer students at this time. Usually I call directly, but I'm wondering if you have like an online referral form that's better for you guys, or what the best way to make referrals is.
Yeah, so there's towards the end of the webinar, we're going to provide our information. So you're more than welcome to at any point reach out to us, and we will pass that referral on to the different programs. Now, the best way of it's always definitely calling our office because we have a person who's always on call. But in addition, if we're not available or it's not during office hours, feel free to call our 24-hour crisis line, because we have advocates at all times, various advocates who are willing to and able to provide with that support and response if needed. Now, if you need for to make that specific referral for that one specific student, definitely it would go through the office so we can ensure that it goes through the Children and Youth program specifically.
Great, thank you so much.
Of course. And again, we're going to provide our emails and our information. So you're always welcome to reach out to us if there's any questions at all, and we're happy to provide you with support. Any other questions?
Good morning. My name is Serene Terrasas. First off, I want to say thank you. I'm a human trafficking case specialist at Community Violence Solutions. So basically, we're partners. And I wanted to come in and just introduce myself, and also to meet you guys and say, you know, as your sister, you know, partner, and, you know, just to say thank you, and also that we also are here for you guys as well. To extend kudos to you guys, and to also say I look forward to working with you guys in the Contra Costa County. Because right now I'm seeing a lot with our 19-year-olds. It's just horrific. And offline, I would love a chance to pick you guys' brain just to see how you guys are handling that. Because right now I'm inundated with the 19-year-olds, and it's all HT stuff, and not in a good way, ladies. It's just not in a good way. And so I'm very honored to be here with you guys during this epidemic and stuff, and just can't get enough. So anything that we could do for you guys, please do not hesitate. Love to collaborate with you guys, and I'll send you my information as well. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. It is very crucial for us as a community to collaborate, right? If we want to make a change and we want this to end.
Absolutely, what works out here, and we should have that, you know, ability. You know, yeah, paperwork is going to happen, but we should also be able to pick up a phone and go, Cindy, you know, you know, because you know you're going to get your paperwork.
Right.
We don't know that.
Right.
But sometimes it just needs to go now. You know, I'm on 80 and I'm, you know, en route, or she's at the bus stop, you know, and I need you, but I'm en route. You know, sometimes we have to do that, you know, instead of going, well, you know, I need, you know, and what's best for our, clients, and sometimes it's gotta, they're gonna be there before our paperwork, but we know it's coming,
Exactly.
you
And
know.
especially talking about our youth, right? We want to make
Yeah,
we really want to ensure that we're ending violence before it begins, but also that we're working with our children and our youth.
yeah,
So we can ensure that that cycle is not going to continue as they're adults. And as a community, that's what we need to do. And this is why we're here today, as you mentioned, and this is why we need to collaborate and come together, because
right.
if we see, really teen dating violence is not taken as serious as it should be. And it's happening, it's a reality.
Right.
Teen
There are kids.
Exactly. And teen dating violence is not just about the teen dating violence, but we're also really referring about itself violence to youth, and how can we
Yeah.
make sure that we're working towards that. And so therefore, I really appreciate your feedback and being here today, because collaboration is such an amazing.
It's huge.
Right.
So any information, like I said, is our information. This is our state. This is our responsibility. And these kids are our future. And if we don't stop it now, that's what's going to happen when we're not going to live forever. And that's the realness of it. And so what are we going to leave behind? And so that's what we're here for, for the next generations. And so that's how I see it. What are we going to leave behind? And, so we could rest at night and we know that we did something, we're making a difference. And timing is of an essence with children, everything's now. So if we miss that 10-minute window, they're like, okay, well, she didn't care, and off they go, and that's the age we live in right now.
Yeah.
And real quick, they'll just, they'll leave us and go somewhere else. Well, she didn't call back. Oh, well, she didn't text me back. So I'm out.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think that today we have quite a bit of participation from administration, social services that work very closely with youth. And, you're right about that. Unfortunately, with youth, it's really a matter of building that immediate rapport. If we're not building that immediate rapport, we lose them.
Yeah, we fall. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
we want to
thank you guys. Thank you guys so much.
For sharing your thoughts with us.
Ditto.
Any other questions or comments from others who are participating today? All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate. Here we have our information for our website. We have Instagram for youth as well, so please follow us. We also have our Facebook accounts. We also have Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube channel, where we will post not only this informational webinar, but others that we work with youth and just with the community. So feel free to definitely follow us. Following, we have we have our information. So there's Maria Barranco. If you have any questions about programs, feel free to email me, Sydney as well. If you have any questions, and Delia, any questions about prevention, collaboration, presentations, we would love to be at your facilities to talk more about the different topics. And then of course, be able to provide not only presentations, but education services and training services on how to be able to work more effectively with our community that are experiencing these type of situations. So thank you so much. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us or always call us to our crisis line, and we are more than happy to serve you. Thank you, and hope to see some of you at our next webinar. Every month we are holding webinars. Bye.
Thank you all for being here. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.